First off, we need to understand why these cars are so popular. It's a very simple answer. I have no clue. I don't know why these cars are as popular as they are outside of the norm, right? We know that these cars are a great platform if you want to build a race car, a drift car, a street car, a high horsepower car, all-wheel drive setups. We've seen that before. They can do anything and everything, so I get that. But there's more to it than that. There's a mystique that goes behind these cars that can't be explained, and no other car really has it in the muscle genre, especially in that era of like muscle, right? So from the 80s to the 90s, there's really not much out there. You could argue maybe the third gen Camaro, but that's not the same market. It's really not even close. There is a loyal following behind those cars, but not the same as a Foxbody, of course. And then right after that, you would start to probably argue the fact for the fourth gen, which would be your Camaro SSs, your WS6s, that platform. People want to fuss about the Foxbody prices, but look at the prices of those cars. Now, the Camaros, not so much, but the WS6, any of the Trans Ams, wow, right? People are paying a freaking premium for those cars. If you take a 65 Mustang, and the reason why I use that example, because I have one. I know the 67, 68 is a little more sought after, but let's use the 65. I think those cars could be bought new for around $3,000 or so. At this point, those cars can't be bought for $3,000. I mean, unless it is absolutely, literally a shell of a car, and it's still going to go for that money regardless. Yeah, you're going to pay big money for that. So we're not there with the Fox bodies. The question is, will we ever be there? I don't think so. I don't think we'll ever be to that point, guys. It would take another 20 years to ever even think about seeing that, and I just don't think we are, because there were so many of them made. But that doesn't mean that they're not sought after, and that doesn't mean that the market isn't going to continue to go up. I think we've almost hit a plateau when it comes to these cars, and Barrett-Jackson was the thing that propelled us onto this plateau. When all those cars hit Barrett-Jackson and started going for big money, and then YouTubers were talking about it, it was on forums, that lit the fire. Now we are where we're at. But I think it brought good recognition to the Foxbody community. But here's the weird thing about it. We are driving the prices for these cars. We get to decide. Nobody come out and said that's what these cars should go for. It happened, and then it's a chain of events after that, right? These cars sell for this, and then this guy's sitting there, he's like, well, man, I have the same kind of car, so I'm going to ask $15,000 for a car that last year was only worth $6,000. I want to see if it sticks. I want to see if somebody buys it. Well, the other guy that's looking to buy a car also just saw this Barrett-Jackson deal, right? So he's like, oh man, it's happening. I better buy now. Like, I knew this was going to happen. So he goes out and he pays this money for this car, and then people on Facebook or wherever the case may be see it or hear about it or whatever the case, and then everybody just floods the market with overpriced cars. There'll always be a few stragglers. They stay behind. They don't know the hype yet, and they're selling these cars cheap. And what's weird about it is when this first happens, I think a lot of those cheaper cars get looked over because they're like, he knows something's wrong with this car. That's why he's selling it so cheap. But I want this car because this guy wants $10,000 for this car. It's got to be nicer than the guy that wants $4,000 for his. When in actuality, when this first lit off, I don't think there was much of a difference in these type of cars per se. Not as much as you might think. You just had people recognizing that they could go for more money, and that's what they were doing. Anyway, the reason why I say this is that's what happened. And then there again, all the fame that these cars have gotten over the years of being great race cars, track cars, great for LS swaps, Coyote swaps. It was like the perfect storm for the Foxbody to just take off. I mean, and that's what's happened. And now it's really hard to find a nice clean car for you're just almost not going to do it for $5,500 like you used to back even 3 years ago or 4 years ago. So now that car that would have cost you $5,500, bare minimum is going to run you $9,500 or something like that now. And what that is just a driver, something you can get in. It's fairly reliable. It's got a couple of modifications. Maybe needs a little bit of paint correction or something like that. Seats got some wear. Not perfect cars is what I'm trying to say. there'll always be room for improvement. But then on the other hand, you have the cars that'll go for, you know, $15,000 to $20,000. Those are going to be really nice examples. I mean, like nice, probably turbocharged, supercharged, built motor stroker, dart block, something along those lines, good paint. That's where you're going to see that $20,000 mark, and then they go from there. Much like any car that's been highly modified and is just a showpiece, obviously they can go for as much as somebody wants to pay. But typically within the $20,000 to $30,000 range is what you're going to start to see. Now, the question is, will this continue to grow exponentially like it has in the past 4 or 5 years? I'm going to say no. And here's the reason why. I think it was good because it put the world on notice that the Foxbody is here and it's here to stay. You know, we kind of knew this from back in the day when, you know, all these manufacturers just started coming out of the woodworks with aftermarket parts, you know, heads, suspension, interior stuff, you know, all, like, you could get anything for a Foxbody back then, and it's continued. Now you can get every nut and bolt, everything. The only thing that I can think of really that you can't get for a Foxbody, obviously we'd love to have our Mustang labeled, you know, officially licensed quarter glass again. We'd like to have that. But outside of that is like your GT side skirts. I don't know of anybody that's making that. So we need to get that into market. Outside of those two things, there's just not much you can't find. And you can even still find those parts, you know, just new old stock or something somebody's pulled off of another car. So there's nothing that's hard to find anymore. Nothing. You might not be able to buy it brand new, but you can absolutely find it, and it's out there. So with all that being said, I think that the Foxbody is going to level off. You'll always see an increase in price. I don't think these cars are going to fall in price. Maybe a couple models, you know, maybe the GT. Maybe the GT starts to fall a little bit in price, or the LX hatchback, or possibly the coupe in time. We don't know. Right now the coupe is the hot car, but I do see the GT making a resurgence as well. Odd color interior cars will probably start to gain value. Right now the options of the Foxbody, like Foxbodies that were ordered with weird options, hasn't lit off yet like it did with some of the older cars, like with the 60s and 70s model cars. Nobody really cares much about it, but in time, if you give it enough time, another 10 years, I think you're going to see the options list start to really pay dividends. Whether this car was ordered with a radio delete, believe it or not, that's a good thing in the collector world. You know, how rare is this car? Here's the thing. I mean, there's so many of these cars out there in the world, but nearly every one of them has been modified and changed. Ultimately, though, the VIN number is what's going to matter. Any of that type stuff is always going to be relevant. So anyway, guys, with all that being said, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this video up. And as always, thanks for watching.